Today's episode is brought to you by MRC, a branding studio hailing out of Raleigh, North Carolina, where they focus on crafting killer design work for clients that love uber creative solutions for companies small and large. You can find and connect with them online at mrcraleigh.com. That's MRCRALEIGH, and at MRC Raleigh on Instagram. The good news is, if you find yourself reaching out, you'll most likely get to chat with yours truly. That's right, it's my little branding co, and we're here to make your brand or idea look amazing. So let's connect. Today's episode is also sponsored by Bernie Wild's Adventure Sauce. Bernie Wild's is an adventure brand that's a place where my love of art and food come together in all the right ways. Bernie Wild's Adventure Sauce is a chef-driven heat sauce that in my book is literally the tastiest and most versatile condiment on the planet. This is an everyday sauce that's perfect with salads, fries, burgers, sushi, and pasta. I call it comfort food in a bottle, and it's 100% all natural, plant-based, gluten-free, and flavor-packed. Its unique, craveable flavor has a chipotle smokiness that's perfectly balanced with its creamy carrot base, mixed with a bit of maple syrup, charred onion, miso, and ají amarillo. But don't take my word for it. If you want to see what others have to say, visit berniewilds.com to check out more. And speaking of, we also sell Bernie Wild's comic books and comic panels created and signed by me, not to mention super dope stickers, shirts, and more. I'm giving each and every one of our Pencil Pushers listeners 20% off for their first online order to show my love for all you supporters of the podcast. So just go to berniewilds.com, place your order, and enter the code PENCIL. That's BURNYWILDS.com. That's it, folks. It's that easy. And now, without further ado, on to the show.
Welcome, folks, to another fine episode of the Pencil Pushers Podcast.
This
I am, of
is the
course, your
Pencil
humble host,
Pushers
Mike Rosado,
Podcast.
and I'm thrilled to be sharing this next chat with my new friend, Derek McDonald. Derek is a West Coast vintage-inspired sign painter that holds the key to some of the greatest traditional crafts of the past 150 years. Hand-painted signs are an amazing part of our industrial history, and Derek is not only a talented carrier of the torch, but he's also a massive historian of the craft. So I learned a lot. Derek not only had his own studio, but also works full-time at Disneyland as a sign painter. We get into the thick of his creative story. I learn more about the history of sign painting, how you too can get into the craft, and what it's like to work at Disneyland, and what he sacrificed happily to get him that remarkable once-in-a-lifetime job. Derek was a blast to chat with, as you'll soon see. So do yourself a favor, follow him on Instagram at Golden West Sign Arts while you sit back, relax, and enjoy my chat with Derek.
All right, so we are officially here with Derek McDonald. I'm just really pumped. I discovered his work through Instagram, and turns out that my designer friends were also familiar with his work, so it's really cool to catch up with you. Derek is a vintage-inspired sign painter. He's out of, at least I thought, Reno, might be in California now. Really excited to talk about his craft and the renaissance that I see, at least in the design world, with sign painting in general. So Derek, welcome to the show, man.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, obviously, like I said before we got on the call, or before we started recording here, you know, people generally have seen lots of painted signs over the years, whether they're traveling to some historic places or even in their own towns. But it seems like there is a bit of a renaissance happening. And as I said, I mean, it definitely feels like this is a culmination of the design world that seems to be revering a lot of the 20th century, particularly mid-century design aesthetic. So it seems really cool to see that this craft, which has been around for so long, seems to be having this resurgence. Like, where did that all start for you in particular? I'm sure it didn't start with 21st century design nerds getting you inspired. It seemed to happen to you from a very early age, right?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I've always been nostalgic and into historic things and genuine, authentic things. No matter what it was, you know, being into music or art or whatever, I always just kind of wanted to find the core of, what it was or is, or what it means to be part of that particular thing that I was into. So later when I discovered sign painting and pinstriping, I was kind of floating around, not really knowing what was what, but eventually I honed in exactly what I liked style wise. And I just got really into the history of it. And, it just went on from there.
Were other people in your family into that at all, or were they artistic? I mean, where did it all come from?
No, nobody was into signs or graphics at all. My whole father's side was all creative and artistic and musically inclined. And then everybody on my mother's side was all mechanically inclined and very handyman, fix it, scientific, precise.
Yeah, so you had a perfect blend of the right and left brain kind of coming together for you, huh? That's the best of both worlds.
I never thought of it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because, as I was looking at some of your work, and by the way, for people who would like to take a look at his work, you can go to his website. I believe it's goldenwestsignpainter.com. And then you're on Instagram where?
I'm on Instagram. It's just at Golden West Sign Arts. And that's actually much more updated as far as portfolio. Yeah, I don't even have access to my own website anymore. It's probably very outdated.
Yeah, no, it was definitely efficient for me to get more of an in-depth view of what you got going on. But just kind of taking a step back, I mean, thinking about the right and left brain of your craft, it's interesting because when I think about sign painters, just sort of like high level, I think of the artistry of it, and I would imagine that a lot of people in that field from the past, and even like people like yourself today, would think of yourselves as more of like craftspeople. But the truth of the matter is that it's a little bit of the artistry, but then also there's the math part of it, right? You've got to there's the carpentry element. I mean, so you really, I guess, from a DNA perspective, you were kind of queued up to be able to really execute on a high level and be able to do what's necessary for this kind of work.
Yeah, I never really gave that much thought, really, but that's probably true. Yeah, taken a little bit from both sides, mother's side, father's side, and I definitely tend to be a little bit more, take after my father's side, a little bit more scattered and a little bit more thinking about just the art and the whatever. But yeah, to be a sign painter, you absolutely have to have both. You're not just a free form artist that approaches a blank canvas and puts your vision. I mean, you do to some degree put your vision, down, but it has to serve a purpose. It's functional commercial art at its, foundation. That's what it is. So you want to be able to express yourself and put your own mark on it, but also you want it to be centered, aesthetically pleasing to a large amount of people. You want to get your color combinations right. You want to have your color theory down, your letter forms correct, and your layout correct, and your eras correct, and your so there's all these things that are spoken and unspoken. Some are things that are taught in books, and some are things that you learn from trial and error. But there's much more to it than just, here's a blank piece of wood or a blank canvas and let me just do my thing. So there's a little bit of both.
Yeah, and it seems like it's pretty tricky too, in the sense of, number one, it is I don't want to say a dying art, but it certainly is an art form that is of the few. And so to me, it feels like you would either have to have some sort of apprenticeship, or you would just have to be a bookworm that just digests all of this. I mean, even if you're reading books about these different artists, you'd still have to figure out how to properly lay out, how to use the materials properly. I mean, how did you specifically learn how to do all that stuff if you didn't have anybody that was handing it down to you from your family?
Right. Well, first and foremost, going off of one of the things that you just said, it's not a dying art so much anymore. It's gotten more and more popular, but what is the dying part of it is what we're talking about, the passing down of techniques and methods. That is dying. because we had a generational gap.
Yeah.
At once upon a time, it was the only way to make signs. I mean, you know, neon and all that, but you know, signs primarily were hand painted. So it was just a quote unquote regular job. It was a blue collar job, or it was a union job, and things were passed down in a proper way. I guess, I don't know if in a proper way is the right way to say it, but you know, there was a union apprenticeship programs, trade schools, in-shop apprenticeship, mentor relationships. And okay, so that was all well and good. Then the computer came along, the vinyl came along, hand-painted signs became outdated. So now we're talking 80s, 90s. There was this whole generation of sign makers that kind of gave up on all that. And then the new wave came, and then we were like, where are all the old guys? You know, there was a gap. There was like a 20-year or so more maybe gap of where there was just radio silence. Of course, there were people that never stopped painting signs, and there was people that mixed both, you know, vinyl, computer, and painted. More or less, there was a big gap there. So that would be the dying part, is the how things are passed down. So there's a whole new generation of kids, I guess, whatever, you know, people in their 20s and 30s and whatnot that are just making it up as they go along, and that gets mixed results. Some sure. It's great and they're really great, but others it's like you know. So that is a challenge. That's the challenge. I think there needs to be more schools, more apprenticeship programs, and general spreading of knowledge like that. So to answer your real question, I am a bookworm. That's what I am. I'm an info junkie. I am a bookworm. When I get into something, watch out, get out of the way, because I'm into it. And you're not even going to want to hang around me, because that is all I'm going to talk about, consume, eat, breathe, sleep. I do that with music. I do that with old cars. I do it with old architecture, old vintage clothing, whatever. But sign painting is my number one. So when I got into it, I was digging and digging and digging and finding old books. And, you know, I know other people that collect old sign painting manuals and trade books and how-tos and things like that, but they don't read them. It's just the strangest thing. I've got a huge collection of old sign painting books and technique manuals and everything, and I just read them front to back over and over and over.
Wow.
And also reference material. Having a reference library, having a digital reference library nowadays is wonderful. I've got a bunch of screenshots on my phone and things like that, but I don't own a computer. So my reference library is paper, and it's old packaging, old newspapers, Montgomery Ward catalogs from the 30s, vintage matchbooks, posters, old calendars, anything with old graphics on it. You know, ice picks would have, you know, graphics advertising the bar that they can, you know, just all kinds of weird little things. I collect all of that stuff. So that is what got me to where I am now, is just consuming books and information and advertising and reference material and really studying it, basically.
What's crazy is that, you know, it seems to me like with you having so much of that now, which I'm sure is probably really hard to find, and I can't even imagine you without a computer sourcing that stuff, because most people just go on eBay, you know, like, oh, I'll go on eBay and I'll get that book. I'll go to, you know, just go find it online, you know. I don't even know how you wound up like finding all of that material, but I would imagine it probably helps that you're in the West Coast, where you would probably find a lot more of that stuff available.
Maybe. I don't know. I've never lived anywhere else. I've only lived in the
Right.
West, the Southwest, and so I'm not really sure. Although, okay, actually, I go to the Midwest here and there. So I did end up, this is a side note, but I did end up later on kind of having a mentor a little bit later, not a full-blown, you know, apprenticeship, but so my buddy, who's kind of a mentor of mine, he lives in the Midwest. He lives in rural Iowa. And before that, he lived in rural Minnesota. Every time I would go to visit him, I would find all kinds of cool stuff. I almost feel like it's, you know, it's untapped when you go out into the middle of the country. So I'd come home with all kinds of cool stuff, old books and magazines and things. And here we have a lot of stuff. There's a high concentration of people that are into collecting a lot of cool things, but you know, they can get a little pricey or whatever. And things have only gotten, like with anything else, things have only gotten way more expensive. Like I have a sign painting book called Atkinson's sign painting book. I think it's from 1906 or 1909. And I have the original printing and I paid $70 for it 10, 12, 13 years ago. It's, I don't know how much. I mean, it would be $1,000 or, you know, $600, $700, $800 now. So if I was starting over now, I don't know what I would do, because I was just getting lucky, you know, finding books for $15 or whatever, you know, way back. You know, I got into this about 15 years ago. So I know I'm not like some old seasoned veteran or anything, but it wasn't yesterday. So things were a little bit easier back then.
Yeah, I have a buddy, Jason Karn, you know, peripherally, we met at a design conference called Creative South a few years back, and we've had him on the podcast. He's a lettering designer. Like he actually designs fonts and all that kind of stuff. And he is very much like you in terms of getting really into the weeds. Like he just sourced a bunch of old books and studies his craft like crazy. He digitized a lot of that, and he has it like available. And I think to me, it feels like that would be like a real value, particularly as that becomes more and more popular. Sign painting becomes more and more popular. I mean, I could see it as like, I don't know if you ever have any interest in getting like an apprentice or somebody who's part-time just to like focus on scanning all that stuff. Somebody who actually has a computer, Derek.
Yeah.
But it seems like that'd be a real value.
I did put a book out a few years ago that was that idea. I put like a scrapbook together of a bunch of different graphics and mostly brush lettering that I found in old print material. So mostly mid-century, because by then, like in the 40s and 50s in the magazines, a lot of the ads were brush lettered, you know, the headings and the punch words and stuff. So, and a lot of characters, a lot of illustrations and cartoon kind of things. I actually put a book out a few years ago, and it was a lot of work. What's that? Yeah.
I said, oh, you did?
Yeah. It is a pretty neat book. It's called Vintage Junk Scrapbook, Volume 1.
I love it. That's awesome. So, you know, one of the things that I found out about you was that part of your inspiration for getting into hand painted signs are your love of vintage cars. How did that come about? You know, my brother and I did parenthetically, we did a road trip across country from Raleigh to California, went down to Las Vegas and back. And so we like stopped over like that Welder Up shop and Neon Museum and all that kind of stuff in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And anyway, what's the connection for you with vintage cars, and how did you get into like, because I know you do some of that, I think you called it like, it's not distress, but it's sort of like, it looks like a faded, like signage that was there. You know, how did you get into all that?
Mm-hmm. Well, old cars have been around. Well, first I have to preface what I'm about to go on and on about by saying that I am not a mechanic. I am not a car customizer. I am merely an enthusiast and a lover of old cars. I do take it very seriously, but I'm best buddies with car customizers and mechanics and stuff. So I don't want them to hear this and be like, oh, you're talking like you, Mr. Car Builder or something. I am not. But I have owned many, many, many old cars and trucks. But they've been around my whole life. My uncles were early custom car guys in the 50s and 60s and up into the 70s in the LA area, particularly in an area called Bellflower and Norwalk, which Bellflower is like kind of home of the, Larry Watson was a car customizer painter there, and he kind of invented the modern day lowrider paint job. So my uncles were kind of involved in that stuff and racing. And then my grandfather was, he owned an auto shop his whole life and was a mechanic in World War II in Okinawa. So old cars have been around forever. So I just, I've always had an old car around. And then I got into pinstriping, or I thought I was going to get into pinstriping, like hot rod lowrider style. And I tooled around with that for a while. Can
you tell people what pinstriping is exactly?
Yeah, pinstriping is basically real thin, skinny lines that accentuate an item. So in particularly, we're talking about on a car. So, you might accentuate the body lines with two long stripes that go all the way down the side of the car. That's what you might refer to as carriage striping, which goes way back hundreds of years. They would stripe the coaches and the carriages. But in the 50s, a guy named Von Dutch in Los Angeles created the modern day pinstriping, quote unquote, modern 50s, which is the hot rod style. So it's this symmetrical style of really thin lines, and they're just freestyle, free-handed, and they would accentuate, the trunk lid or the hood of a car or the dashboard. It's basically just ornamentation or icing on the cake. And it goes hand in hand with hot rod customs and lowriders. I would check out Big Daddy Ed Roth, Von Dutch, Dean Jeffries for early pinstriping history. So I got into that, and I was going to car shows and cruising my cars around and pinstriping my own cars and bikes and stuff. And then I would always see at car shows, I would always see, a nice trunk with a nice pinstripe design. And then maybe next to it was like a, whatever, I don't know, just like the name of the car, Sweet Thing or whatever, I don't know, hot stuff in script, and it was obviously brush lettered by the same person that did the pinstriping. So I started putting two and two together, that like this was kind of related, the lettering. And then later on, I linked it up with, this also correlates with signs and window lettering and lettering on walls and lettering on pickup truck doors for advertising. And so later on, I was able to connect it all. And luckily through an older sign painter in San Francisco named Jimmy the Saint, I was able to kind of link up with him early on, and he kind of showed me a few simple things. And so that's the connection with the car thing. And then
Jimmy the Saint.
Doing Jimmy the Saint, and the would be THA, Jimmy the Saint. And that is a character. Like, forget me, I'm a square. I am boring. Right. Jimmy the Saint is who should be on the show right now.
Nice. We'll give him a call.
He's got real stories. Yeah.
So that's awesome, man. So yeah, it's one of the cool things that I loved about like when we were on our way back, coming down California, making our way to Nevada, mm-hmm. Going down Route 66 and seeing these beautiful cars, man, and just this amazing hand lettered painted signs that were on there. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
I'd love to dig in with you on like your process for putting together a hand painted sign. Like, let's talk about some of the more detailed stuff where you're not just painting on a window, for example. Like, you're doing something that's going to be CNC routed. You're doing all of the carpentry work. What is the process of doing something that's completely custom? Because I know you actually work on custom logos, graphics. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. You like that whole process of creating this whole, kind of whole cloth design that you want to present to your client. What is your process for that?
Man, I'm almost ashamed to tell you because it's lame. I just do thumbnail sketches, and they're pretty bad usually. Sometimes they're to scale. I'll use an architect scale, and I'll do like 1.5 inches equals 1 foot scaled up. Sometimes I don't. It depends. It depends on how much the trust the client has. Sometimes it won't be to proper scale. It'll just be a, chicken scratch thumbnail. And
is there a project you could reference to paint a picture a little bit, like one in particular that comes to mind?
Where I would use that method? All of them. And usually, if not that, there's no sketch at all. It's just, we talk about it and then I just make it. So most of what you'll see on, say, my Instagram, because that's most current, just starts off with a real simple chicken scratch, kind of not very good sketch. I mean, good enough to get the idea across, to get the style and the lettering style and how the layout's going to be and the shape, if I'm going to do a cutout shape or whatever, that's all plain as day, but it's not going to be, we're not going to present it to like a board, Chamber of Commerce, and get it approved or whatever, because it's just not, it's not digital. It doesn't look like a blueprint. Now, I have had to have done that before, where I really grid it out and it's perfectly to scale, because it has had to go get approved by a board of a town to get, like I've designed a couple of neon signs. I don't bend neon myself, but I've designed some and had them fabricated, and then I've done the painted portions. That stuff is real structural and there's a lot of liability involved. So that is where I've had to really like focus in and make some very precise drawings. But that's really
what's the liability that's involved with neon?
It falling down and structural stuff, because the sign, like for instance, that behind me, I know this isn't a visual podcast, that's a big neon sign can back there. It's huge, and like if we were going to remount that up on a wall, that would have to go through a lot of permits and things like that. So that's when you have to start doing a lot of pre-planning, getting approved. Most stuff, it's not that, it doesn't fall into that category. It's windows, walls, interior signs. If it is a big main wood sign, we just pop it up there with bolts, or I get the business owner's contractor to do it for me. So I get away with just making a quick sketch, and I'll maybe send them a couple pictures of the colors that I'm thinking, and we go back and forth. But and that's pretty much it. I do have to say that I haven't always been that lucky or blessed in that realm of the craft. It's taken a long time. Way back, I used to run a sign shop in Berkeley, California, an actual physical like storefront sign shop. And I was just taking on, as long as it was hand painted, I would take it on. So there was corporate logos, things for baseball stadiums, things for tech companies. And it was all this, it was very prim and proper. And, it was a lot of permits and getting things approved and, color swatches and all this stuff. Well, then I left the Bay Area and I moved back to where I'm from, which is Reno, Nevada. And I cut my cost of living in half. So what I did with that comfort was I told myself, okay, this is my big moment. This is my big moment to hone in the style that I want to do, that I'm passionate about. Stay away from the corporate stuff, the pre-designed logos that other people have designed that they just want me to come in and paint. So when I moved, since I didn't have to be so desperate and take on every single job, I just started saying no to things. I don't want to do that because it's something I didn't design, or that's a little too whatever it may be. And so several years of doing that has kind of whittled things down or filtered things to where now, and I'm like knocking on wood, I mostly just get customers that already know what I do, and I can get away with just a real quick preliminary sketch, and they go, yeah, I've seen what you do, just do it. And then we just do it. And I almost have never had an issue with that.
Is there a reference that people can look up that of a particular project that you thought was the most challenging for a number of reasons, whether it's just mixed media, mixing neon, or mixing script fonts mixed with graphics and super clean serif font, sans serif fonts, etc. Like, what would you think is the most challenging one for you?
Challenging. When you say challenging, what comes to mind to me is the physical aspect of it. I will take anything on. It doesn't matter if it's 3 inches by 6 inches or if it's 100 feet or whatever. I can do it. Some things are more tedious than others, but I would say it's not really a challenge. You just do it. The most challenging one that always comes to my mind is just simply the largest sign I ever painted, which was 20 feet high by 100 feet wide on a corrugated metal warehouse barn in an almond processing facility out in agricultural Northern California off of a highway. And it was 115 degrees when I did it. It was a peak of a heat wave. And I did it with a buddy of mine who was living in Denver at the time. And that was the most challenging. That was
how long did it take?
By far 6 days.
Wow.
6 days. And every single day it was over 110 degrees. And, you know, the forecast didn't say it was going to be 115 or one whatever. It was, we brought a thermometer up from home and hung it on the boom lift. We were way up on a boom lift. And we hung it from the rail. And because the sun was hitting the metal and bouncing back, it was like 115, 116. And we were out there for days. Wow. That was the most challenging. And that's it.
Now was the actual signage on the corrugated part, or did you have like a separate smooth surface to work off of?
Right on the corrugated metal itself. Yeah. Yep. We painted directly on the surface, which is, you know, it always, when you get approached to paint a corrugated metal, you know that it's going to take twice as long as it would to paint a flat surface, easily twice as long. So on top of that, the thing is, the letters are 20 feet tall by 100 feet wide, you know? So
and was
that was the most challenging.
So basically, you know, we're talking about when you say corrugated, it's literally those wavy sort of aluminum surfaces. And
exactly.
what would that go fairly deep, where the tunnel, where the sort of like crevices or tunnels fairly deep?
Yeah. This one in particular was more of a like the old school ones are rounded, curvy, like a 3-sided, like angular, and then it flattens out, and then it's another angular thing. You know, so it was a lot of angle. Yeah, but you know, the good thing is I worked for this guy for a few months that just did huge signs for schools. And he always used to say, it doesn't have to look good up close as long as it looks good from down here on the ground. You know, you get, and you're fussing about every detail, and then you get down and go out to the highway and it looks like a sticker. You know, it just looks like it's just
super
meant to be
crisp.
Yeah.
Now, how is it that you scale something like that so you get the proportions right?
Architect's ruler. It's a drafting tool. It's it's a 3-sided ruler, and it's got different scale ratios on it, and you just choose. You know, okay, I'm going to draw this, and it's going to be everything that's 1 inch. In reality, when I blow it up, is going to equal 1 foot. Or, you know, 3 inches equals 1 foot. So you just mock up your scaled surface that you want to fill up, and you work off of that. It's just basically just doing a scale drawing. It's fairly simple.
It seems like it would be incredibly intimidating to me. So it's nice to know that it's easier than it seems. Or maybe you're dispelling a lot of the mystery. You should say how complicated it is and make it and keep it at that.
Yeah. I guess what I mean by it's fairly simple is that it's like just a piece of paper, a pencil, and this one ruler that tells you when you draw an inch, you're drawing a foot. When you blow it up to scale, right? So, like when I knew that the surface that I had to cover had to be 20 feet tall by 100 feet wide, well, my drawing, I just had to scale it. I just had to make a box of that, you know, to scale and draw within it, and then I knew, oh, you know, the serif of this D is 1.5 inches. So in real life, that's going to be such and such. You know, you just convert it and mock it up on the site by blowing it up, you know, with the scale that you were working in. it goes back to that. It's not just art. There's a lot more that goes into it.
I mean, for example, I have friends who have done mural art, and what they will do is they'll literally project the art onto the wall, and then they'll trace. Now you're not doing that.
I wouldn't do that on site. There would just be no way I could properly, efficiently do that.
Scale it properly without it distorting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great method, and that's old school. They were doing that when projectors were lit with candle or gas lamps, and a big lens. That's a great old school method. And I use a projector here in my little home workshop. I'll draw onto a clear acetate and I'll put it on the old school projector and I'll blow something up, or take an old clip art or old illustration and blow it up. So I use that too.
You mean like the old classroom projector type stuff? Yeah.
But on site, I'm not a big fan of that myself. I'm always in some weird predicament where it's like that job that I keep referencing, the one with the corrugated metal. That was in the middle of an almond orchard. So what am I going to do? Put the projector on the branch of an almond tree? You come with patterns and your scale system and your grid and your mind or your notes or whatever, and you make it work. And the old timers, so that's called wall dogging. It's an old term that isn't very nice. There's a kind of a hierarchy in the sign world, in the union shops. The fancy guys would be the show card writers, which is like temporary cardstock paper signs, which is very fine work for department stores and things like that, and movie theaters. And then gold leaf work. And then there'd be your truck letterers and your commercial sign painters in the shops. And then there would be your wall dogs. Your wall dogs were the guys that were in overalls that were covered in paint, that probably had a flask with whiskey in one of the pockets. And they were going up on rigging on the swing stages, on, block and pulley, tackle, you pull the rope and it brings you up on the little plank of wood and all that.
Sure.
Those were wall dogs, and they would go out and paint these signs on brick walls, like Coca-Cola ads or whatever, and they were kind of the bottom of the barrel. So they got called wall dogs. Well, those guys would go out with no layout or no nothing at all. They just had the notes and how big they were supposed to make it. And they would count bricks. Okay, each letter is going to be 3.5 bricks wide. The thin strokes are going to be 1 brick, and the thick strokes are going to be 2 bricks. And it's going to go from this brick to that brick. So, okay, here, helper, coat this out with white lead. And then they would coat it out, and then they would cut it in with black paint. They would give themselves a white background, and it would be white lead broken down with gasoline or turpentine and linseed oil. They would coat that in with a brush. And then when that would dry, and then they would take black. Lamp black was a paint that they would use, and it was literally the soot from lamps is how they would make black.
Really?
And they would coat over the white, and they wouldn't paint the letters themselves. They would paint around the letters, making a black background, leaving the letters white. That's true old school wall dog.
Wow.
Right there. So they would go out with no sketch and just do it.
Amazing. So you're basically talking about like every town has them, right? It's always those taller high rises that from like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, where you see these giant signs that are up there for Goodyear tire or something like that. Absolutely.
The old faded ads, or the old hotels or the old apartment buildings would have whatever, Rossmore Manor, painted huge across a brick wall, spanning across the whole entire building. Those were wall dogs that did that, and they were probably up there drinking whiskey, like I said, in the middle.
Well, you know what they say, man, a good sign painter is a relaxed sign painter. That's how I always see it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, being a vintage inspired sign painter, obviously you have a lot of what I would imagine is a lot of reverie for the artwork that was done at Disney, right? So you're a full-time Disneyland sign painter.
I am now.
Yeah, and I'm a huge animation fan. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a Disney animator. And I always, like you did with sign painting, I would read every book on Disney animation I could possibly find. And you always had these legends that would show up as like the kings and queens of the animation business that happened to work at Disney in particular. And a couple of questions I have. Number one is, are there masters of hand-painted signs that books always point to? And number two, I'd love for you to roll into how you got to be working as a sign painter at Disneyland.
Yeah. So your first question, are there masters in sign painting that are referred to in books particularly?
Yeah, for example, for example, at Disney, the key animators back in the day during the sort of like mid-century, the time when Walt Disney was at his height, they had the 9 old men. And those were the top dog animators, right? Everybody knew Milt Kahl, Mark Davis, Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnston. So we're there. I mean, surely when you're looking at all these books, Ward Kimball, one of my favorite animators of all time. Surely
my
through
favorite guy ever.
Yeah, he's amazing, isn't he? What a freaking master genius, like comedy genius, just hands down a genius.
Genius.
What I mean, were there 9 old men of sign painting? And I'm saying men because I would imagine there probably weren't many female sign painters.
You are right about that. Unfortunately, your assumptions are right. It was a men's trade primarily, not 100%, but primarily. No, not really, but kind of. Back in the glory days, same thing as with Disney. Like, really, the peak of design in general, in my opinion, is 30s, 40s, 50s. I love stuff that predates that as well, of course. But those days, there was a sign painter who wrote books, and he is my idol, one of my idols, and his name was E.C. Matthews. He is one of my 9 old men. I can only speak for myself, but he wrote his own books. Sign painting course would be one. Interesting side note, total nerd thing. So E.C. Matthews, sign painting course, right? That is like my Bible. It's from the 50s. So if you go to...
I'm looking at it now.
If you go to City Hall in Disneyland and you look at the bookshelf, there's a bunch of fake books that are molded into this bookshelf, and they're all hand painted. Snow White, Peter Pan, sign painting course, E.C. Matthews. It's at Disneyland. One of the sign painters was being clever and painted a sign painting book at Disneyland.
That's awesome.
A funny connection. But yeah, E.C. Matthews, Atkinson, Strong's Book of Design. He was an instructor at the Detroit School of Lettering at the turn of the century. His deal was Art Nouveau. So if you look at his books, they're very Art Nouveau, very funky and out there. But for my money, it's E.C. Matthews. There's an author named Ralph Gregory that made a book called Sign Painting Techniques, I think in the 60s. And that's just a really killer book, full of fundamentals, like really solid. And then later, there was a man by the name of Mike Stevens. And he was a specialist in show card writing, which I mentioned before, which is really, really high caliber, fine, small hand lettering on cardstock, meant to advertise temporary things or shows or ballets or movie theater things that were going to be thrown away. But they were these wonderful works of art, and it's like takes the highest skill. So Mike Stevens was a show card expert, and he wrote a book called Mastering Layout. And this was in the 80s. So, it's not really going back to the time that I focus on, but he really is like one of the best ever to fully, completely have a full grasp of color theory, layout, balance, design, letter form. So yeah, there's a few people out there that are just really key people that you hear about a lot if you really study the craft.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're saying the what was it? The card? What was it you called it?
Show
The
cards.
cards. Yeah, show cards. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about that, almost makes me think about like some of those commercials you'd see in TV shows, like where they do those commercial breaks that were this paid sponsorships. Basically, it would be Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
cigarettes, and stuff like
Mhm.
that,
The,
and you'd
the
see
the
this.
the
Yeah,
average.
yeah, yeah, and they'd literally be like a card, right? You know,
Total.
and it's amazing how beautiful the work
Yes.
is. It's just so elegant, so precise. It
That was
kind of
all.
makes me sick.
That was all show card writers. That was all sign painting. Um, I actually have a big collection. They're actually behind me right there. I have a huge collection of a sign journal, a monthly sign magazine called Signs of the Times that I
Yeah.
think started publishing it in like 1900 something. It's really old. Well, I have every issue from 1946 to 1980. And in the 50s and the early 60s issues, they had a whole article just focused on those television commercial cards, like
Oh wow.
ideas and the galleries of guys and gals that were doing them around the country. So yeah, that was a big part of it at a certain time when that was, happening. That was definitely a good source of work for those show card writers. And you're totally right. That is exactly what that is.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's pretty impressive. And I also think about a lot of the way that movies started. A lot of times they would show all of the credits at the beginning of the movie. Now they do them at the end,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they were always done with these lavish, hand painted
Mm-hmm.
artwork. Even every single person that they were crediting on the film, they were all
Mm-hmm.
painted so beautifully. It's just remarkable, remarkable work.
They would even do, it would say like produced by, and then it would be a bunch of dots, dot, John Smith. Even those little dots were,
Yeah. Yeah, insane,
yeah,
insane.
yeah.
So, talk to me about your work at Disneyland. How did that start? I mean, to me, it feels like it would be an honor to, particularly because I think we're very like-minded in the love of the craft, entertainment, art, and the art part of it in general.
Mhm.
It must have been something to have gotten the opportunity to get this job. And how did that come about?
Um, I'll try to shorten it. It's real long. I first became aware of that it even was a job in 2013. I was in my own sign shop in Berkeley when a gentleman walked in the door and said, "Hey, my daughter lives across the street. I'm up here on vacation. I just wanted to see your sign shop." And I don't know if you know this, but there's a sign shop at Disneyland, and I'm a sign painter at Disneyland. And I went, what? Like my whole mind just opened up to this whole new crazy realm, like that's a job. Well, because I knew that it used to be a job, of course, and I was actually consciously aware that another one of my idols, like I mentioned him before when I was talking about cars and pinstriping. His name is Big Daddy Ed Roth. He invented the character Ratfink, if anybody's familiar. Really interesting guy. This is totally a side note, but you should look him up. Anywho, when he got a little tired of building hot rods and pinstriping and doing things like that, he actually got a job as a sign painter at another theme park in Southern California called Knott's Berry Farm
Oh yeah,
in the early 80s. So I
I've
had already
been.
about that. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. But then, of course, I'm thinking like that's a thing of the past. I think it was like 1980 or 1979 or something. So fast forward to 2013, and a guy walks in and says he's a sign painter at Disneyland, and he's been working there for 20 something years. He still works there to this day, by the way. So it kind of started from there. Then I got contact information, and I started sending emails and resume and this and that. And then I was up for, and it's basically like, yeah, kid, your work is looking okay. Keep it up, keep practicing. But you got to wait for somebody to retire, and people work here
Right.
35, 40, 50 years. So get in line, but I kept persistent, every few months I would email and hope that I wasn't doing more damage than good by annoying them. But I would send my my resume updated, pictures and stuff. And then, okay, 2015 comes along and it's like, hey, guess what? You're never going to believe this. Somebody's retiring. We want to interview. And I get all excited. And I update my resume again and I update my portfolio. And like last minute, I guess they had gone on my website and saw a picture of me painting, and they saw my hands, and I had tattoos all over my hands. I am not completely covered, but I'm fairly well covered in tattoos. So at the time I had tattoos on my hands, and they said, that's not the Disney look. It's not our choice. If there's nothing we can do about it, but since you have that, we have to stop the process. You're dead in the water. So I was devastated because this was like,
you're not even forward facing with the guests.
You can be, you can't, sometimes we
I
are,
see.
During open hours. So it just goes across the board. If the policy, is applied to one group of people, it's going to be applied to literally everybody in the company. So,
Gotcha.
So I wasn't even mad. I said, you know what? Yeah, you're right. There's a reason why Disneyland is perfect, because, there's all these, you guys have standards or whatever. So I said, fair enough. Don't forget about me. I'm going to get these tattoos removed off of my hands and keep me in mind. So by then
wow.
and I hooked up with a local tattoo removal place who actually wanted a bunch of hand painted signs. So luckily, it would have cost a fortune, but luckily I was able to do like swap sign trade for tattoo removal. And it took almost 2 years, and I got them completely removed off of my hands. And then all of a sudden I get a message, and it's somebody from Disneyland, and it's somebody saying, I appreciate your, or would you ever be interested in coming working in our shop? And I go, yeah, sure, I'll take a job. What shop is this? Disneyland sign shop. And I go, well, don't you know I've already been talking to you guys? And she goes, no, had no idea. You're already interested? And I go, yeah, I talked to so-and-so and so-and-so. And she goes, oh, that's the other sign shop. We have two. There's two departments. And I don't really want to go into particulars, but there's two different sign painting shops in the park. Okay. I had the other one, and the other one discovered me on their own without any of that other stuff. It was completely coincidental.
Wow.
So needless to say, I said yes. And it took another 1.5 years for the person that was supposed to retire for this position to actually retire. So that was another 1.5 years. And then I got the interview and I got the job.
So, but nothing happened with the tattoos? They didn't have any issue with? Did you bring it up or did you not bring it up?
Oh, I brought it up to the new department, the department that I still work in. And I said, oh yeah, you'll never guess. I had this whole thing with the tattoos and whatever, but I have them removed. And they said, good, because you have to have them removed.
So basically the main thing was that you just had to take off the hand. It was just the where the hands were. You had to be able to cover up your arms and still, there, but the rest of your skin needed to be, okay. Gotcha. Wow.
That's
okay.
Right.
So how long ago was that?
They've actually lightened that policy now, but you're still not supposed to
because literally everybody's got tattoos.
Yeah. Now you can have some tattoos, but you still can't have full sleeves. And I do. My arms are 100% covered. So I'm always cold anyway. So I wear long sleeves and a jacket at work every single day. So nobody, you wouldn't even know. It's all fine.
So how do you keep busy? Because it seems to me like painted signs would be, Disneyland is set,
Mm-hmm.
How is it that somebody has a full-time job there? Unless maybe I'm missing it because
no,
all the windows are done or, so what is it you're creating on a daily basis over there?
There's a reason why everything looks perfect there. Because it hasn't been sitting there for years and years and years, decaying, constantly getting, and I'm talking signs, menu boards, trash cans, ride vehicles, every flower, every plant, everything, every railing, every piece of brass, you name it, it is being tended to by its specific department and their people. Window decorations, lighting, everything. Machinists, iron workers, plumbers, carpenters, mill workers. It's all there, and it's all on the up and up. It's all being constantly redone. So it's everything's on a cycle, and there is a lot of hand painted work at that place. A lot things that are obvious, and then a lot of things that are not obvious to the naked eye that you never would even know. So it is, not only is it a full-time job for me, but it's a full-time job for the team that I'm a part of, and the other one that I was supposed to work at in the first place. Like, that's a whole other thing with a bunch of people up there as well. And then there's agers and grainers that just do faux finishing and make things look old.
Yeah.
There's
and I would imagine you're also probably doing work that's not just vintage, because I mean, you're really, Main Street's probably the only real, well, maybe I guess, like, well, I go to Disney World, so it's probably a little bit different, but I'm assuming some of the key areas are the same. I mean, you've got Adventureland.
Mm-hmm.
I could see where that's probably needed.
Mm-hmm.
Main Street, Tomorrowland's probably, I guess you're just, I mean, is everything hand painted there? Is there any vinyl that's being used?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's vinyl. There's everything. There's a little bit of everything. Luckily, so my job title at Disneyland is actually sign painter. That is literally my job title there. So thankfully, that's what I'm called upon to do first and foremost, whether that is with an airbrush or, old school brush technique, applying mold, or I'm very lucky to be there. And it's not every single thing is just a dream come true. There's some tedious tasks, like applying decals on trash cans. But when I first started working there, I thought that was going to be like the worst thing in the world. But honestly, after meticulously hand lettering the original trolley streetcar gold leaf sign that is supposed to look exactly like it did in 1955, and it's all done by hand, like, there's pictures of Walt Disney standing right next to the thing, and I'm looking at it, and it's like, I got to make it look exactly like. After doing that, I'll spend a day putting decals on some trash cans. It's kind of nice. So, but yeah, I can't get into super specifics, but that's what I do there. It's kind of like,
what is it you can't be specific about?
I mean, I can just give you a broad idea of what I do. I can't go into particulars really, but I think that's probably all that's needed to be known anyway.
I could ask you tons of questions about that, because I love, again, I'm on the East Coast and I love going to Disney World and stuff, and seeing how perfect and amazing it is. I mean, it's just incredible, the craft and the dedication to their brand, and what people have come to expect for, 60 plus years.
Yeah. That's right.
It's got to be such an honor.
There's a high standard.
Yeah, it's got to be such an honor, especially for somebody like you who clearly, I mean, it's obvious that you're looking at everybody who works there is at the top of their craft. So that must be something that's pretty incredible. What's the best part of your day over there? What's the best part of your gig?
Oh man, there's so many things. Well, number one, first and foremost, is just in general, where I'm physically at and what I am being asked and being trusted to do and who I'm doing it for. The Walt Disney Company, and we're trying to keep this legacy of Walt Disney going, and just that is the best part every day. And there's little reminders that pop up here and there, because sometimes you get into a task and you get all sidetracked and you're just like hyper focused on this one thing you're doing, but then little things pop up where you go, oh, I'm like, you become conscious of what you're doing and what it means and how many people are going to see it. And so that is the best part of every day, is just being a small part of a really big thing, as opposed to me running my own sign business where it's just me. It's literally just me. Big deal, whatever, who cares, right? But I get to go to this magical place that has all this history and all this nostalgia, and it means so much to so many people, and it's such It's so well cared for and so well maintained. I get to go be a small part of that. I mean, that's it, that's the best part of every day. But then there's other things like just how well treated I am there. And, like here, working on my own, it's like, oh, geez, I ran out of pencils. I got to order a bunch of stuff, or I live in a rural area. I live in the boonies, in the desert. So like anytime I have to go get supplies, I got to do a hour and 45-minute drive. But at work at Disney, it's like, it's all there. What do you want? How many pencils do you want? 5 boxes? Here. It's amazing. It's like walking into a dream scenario every single day. And it's just, you're pampered and you're expected to, do a good job. Of course, you're supposed to have the skills and everything and whatnot. But otherwise, it's just like, what a nice place to be. What a nice.
Are you still living in Reno?
Oh, no. Reno's 500 miles away from Disneyland.
Okay, that's what I was curious about, because you were talking about the long drive. Yeah.
Yeah. I do have a really long drive. Luckily, it's not that far. I am a little bit of a weirdo, and I just don't really want to live in a big city anymore. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area for years. And then, as I mentioned before, I moved back to Nevada, where I grew up, and it just felt really nice and really comfortable. So when I finally did take this job, I'm just a lover of the desert. I grew up in Nevada,
which
is
beautiful out there.
I love it. So I was really into being in the high desert up in Nevada. I was just so happy. So I chose to live in the Mojave Desert, right next to Joshua Tree National Park, in little tiny town. And I have to drive about 95 miles to work every single day, Monday through Friday. And I start at 5 a.m. And I know people are listening and cringing right now. And that's fine. You're right to do that. I'm crazy. I wake up at 2:30 in the morning every day to go to work. And I start at 5 and I get off at 1. And I also run my own business still. I come home and I paint signs for, my own customers. Needless to say, I'm a single man. Nobody's wondering where I am and when I'm coming home for dinner. So
I'm sure that helps out tremendously.
Yeah, it does.
What time, like, how much sleep do you get, man?
Now that it's summer again and late, it's really easy to stay up late. I'll get.
Yeah, totally.
Last week I got 3 hours of sleep. That was last Wednesday. I got 3 hours of sleep on one of the nights last week. That was my bad night. And then other nights I get about 5. Yeah. I've always been a heavy coffee drinker for like the last 20 years. And now I'm even more of a heavy coffee drinker, just black. I drink a whole thermos of coffee before I even get to work.
Right.
So, whatever.
You don't have to tell me. I'm the same way.
Battles. We all have to make our own sacrifices. It just so happens that I found a place that I love to live that is absolutely beautiful. There's so much now. It used to just be the gumbo bowl or the whatever it was in New Orleans Square, at least at our park. It was like one thing. And now, oh man, so many things. Yes. I'm hoping they come out with a vegan corn dog and even more so. I don't know about in Florida, but here we have it's not vegan. They have a pickle corn dog. So it's a pickle hollowed out with a hot dog in it and then battered and fried on a stick like a corn dog. I want a vegan version of that. I want to be gross and disgusting and eat a vegan pickle corn dog so bad. Yeah. Thank you. I have no complaints other than that long drive. I don't even mind getting up at 2:30 a.m. It doesn't bother me one bit. Everything's all good over here. Mm-hmm. Good question. I would try to source the books, reach out to people, and try to do your best to make a best judgment on whether they're credible or not. But try to reach out to people on social media, try to find some old timers. There's a lot of people doing workshops now, like they'll do a 2 or 3 day workshop on how to do hand lettering. And that's okay, do those, that's fine. But that's not going to set you up for a career. If you really want to do this for real, quote unquote, you got to do more than that. Read, email people, bother me. I literally answer every message I get on Instagram about what brush do I use? What technique is this? How do you sketch this? How do you do that? I can't answer all of them because I am just, I don't know everything. But if I do know it, I will help the person that's asking. And if I don't know, I'll do my best to refer them to something or somebody that will. So just reach out. And when you do get into it and you do start practicing, focus on the fundamentals. That's 3 or 4 specific alphabet letter styles. And that's being able to draw them and paint them with a brush. And don't run before you crawl. That's the biggest thing with this, and probably with a lot of things. That would be my advice, but just send me a message. On Instagram. I'm happy to answer whatever. I have a good time chatting with people because I just care about all this stuff so much. So if somebody wants to talk about it, be careful what you ask for, because I could really go on and on and on. No problem. Thank you. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at the Pencil Pushers Podcast for visual representation of our guest artwork, topics discussed, and anything else that contributes to the show. So be sure to subscribe. Tell a friend. Tell lots and lots of friends. Become a leadhead. And we're out.